Silence, then breathing. Wet, laboured. The sound of air dragged through ruined lungs, filtered through metal. November 25th, 1177. You're looking at a teenage boy who can barely close his fingers around leather reins. His hands, wrapped in linen bandages that were white this morning, are now stained rust brown. Beneath those bandages, flesh is rotting, bone showing through in places. Leprosy doesn't just kill you, it erases you, piece by piece, while you're still breathing. The silver mask hiding his face isn't decorative, it's necessary. What's underneath would make hardened soldiers look away. 3 miles ahead, the horizon has disappeared. 26,000 warriors, mounted cavalry, stretching so far across the plain that the dust clouds look like fog rolling in from the sea. Banners, green, black, gold, snapping in the wind like the wings of hunting birds. The Sultan Saladin commands them. 40 years old, undefeated, so confident he's already sent messengers ahead to Damascus, describing tomorrow's victory feast. Behind the boy with the silver mask, 500 knights, that's it. 500 exhausted men on exhausted horses, wearing armour dented from a dozen previous battles, holding lances with chipped points and swords that need sharpening. The math is simple. 52 enemies for every Christian. The kind of odds that don't even merit discussion. You don't fight those odds. You surrender or you die. Every advisor told him to stay behind Jerusalem's walls. Every military treatise ever written says this is suicide by cavalry charge. Even his own body, nervous system destroyed by disease, joint swelling, skin splitting, is screaming at him to stop. Baldwin IV does something impossible. He gives the order to charge. What happens in the next 3 hours will break the mind of everyone who tries to explain it. Christian chroniclers will call it divine intervention. Muslim historians will call it a catastrophe sent by God as punishment. Modern military analysts will study it for centuries and still struggle to make the math work. But here's what nobody tells you about Montgisard. The battle was already lost before a single lance was lowered. Saladin had made no mistakes. His army was rested, well supplied, positioned on perfect cavalry terrain. His commanders were experienced. His warriors were elite Mamluks, slave soldiers trained from childhood to kill. The Crusaders were outnumbered 52-1. So how did 20,000 of Islam's finest warriors end up dead in a single afternoon? The answer isn't what you think. And it starts with a decision Saladin made 3 days earlier. A decision so logical, so obviously correct, that it would destroy everything he'd built. Before we watch history unravel, quick word. If you're the kind of person who gets pulled into these documented moments from the past, the ones that textbooks somehow forget to make interesting, subscribing helps us dig deeper into the archives and uncover more of these stories. All right, back to November 1177, and the most dangerous man in the Holy Land is about to make his first mistake. Jerusalem in 1177 isn't the golden city of psalms and paintings. It's a corpse pretending to breathe. Walls cracked from 80 years of siege, streets half empty, because anyone with sense fled months ago. The holiest city in Christendom, defended by fewer soldiers than a modern high school has students. The kingdom is held together by scar tissue and denial. And on the throne sits a 16-year-old boy whose own flesh is betraying him. Baldwin IV wasn't supposed to be king. He wasn't even supposed to be alive. Leprosy in the 12th century isn't just a disease. It's a divine curse made visible. Lepers ring bells to warn people of their approach. They're buried in unmarked graves, erased from family records, treated as if they died the moment the first white patch appeared. But Baldwin's father, King Amalric, saw something in his son that disease couldn't touch: intelligence, clarity, a mind that cut through problems like a blade through silk. So when Amalric died suddenly in 1174, the crown went to a 13-year-old boy who would never marry, never have children, whose kingdom was already being measured for a coffin. Facing this dying kingdom stands Saladin, Born Yusuf ibn Ayyub rose from military commander to sultan through tactical genius that would make Machiavelli weep. By 1177, he's done what generations failed to do: unite Egypt and Syria under one banner. One purpose: take back Jerusalem. He's 40 years old, prime of power, commanding endless gold from Egyptian trade, warriors from a dozen territories, siege equipment that can crack fortresses like eggs. And here's what should terrify you: Saladin isn't a monster. He's pious, diplomatic, respected even by his enemies. He follows the rules of war, but rules don't matter when you're facing annihilation. By autumn 1177, Europe has stopped sending help. They've written off Jerusalem. Even the Pope is quietly negotiating what happens after it falls. If this moment doesn't move you to understand how close we came to watching civilization pivot on the actions of a dying teenager and 500 desperate men, you're missing the lesson our ancestors died screaming to teach. The world doesn't care about your odds, it only cares about your will. But there's something else about Baldwin the chroniclers, mentioned only in passing, almost embarrassed. He smiled before battles, not nervous bravado, genuine anticipation. A leper king whose nerves were so destroyed he couldn't feel pain anymore, who had nothing left to lose, grinning behind his silver mask as armies 20 times his size assembled on the horizon. Think about what that means. Pain is your body's warning system. It tells you when to stop, when you've gone too far. Baldwin's warning system was dead. He could push past every threshold that would make a normal man collapse, and he'd never know until something actually snapped. Saladin, for all his brilliance, never understood what that meant. He was about to learn. November 23rd, 1177, Saladin's army crosses into Crusader territory like a flood breaking through a dam. 26,000 mounted warriors. The supply train alone stretches for miles. Tents, food, siege equipment, portable forges to repair weapons. This isn't a raid. This is an invasion designed to end the Crusader presence in the Holy Land permanently. A Muslim chronicler writes, "The banners of the faithful covered the hills like stars fallen to earth. The hoofbeats sounded like thunder that would not end." Saladin's plan is textbook brilliant. Bypass the fortress of Ascalon. It's garrisoned, fortified. Why waste time on a siege? Sweep north along the coast, cutting Jerusalem off from the sea. Strangle the supply lines. Wait for starvation and internal collapse. He's done this before. It always works. Inside Jerusalem, the situation is worse than desperate. It's mathematically hopeless. Baldwin's advisors, the few nobles who haven't already fled, lay out the numbers in the throne room. City garrison, 750 men, mostly infantry. Available knights, maybe 500 if they call in every favour. Templar reinforcements, 80 warrior monks, already exhausted from defending border castles, against Saladin's 26,000. Raymond of Tripoli, one of the kingdom's most experienced commanders, says it plainly. "Sire, we should negotiate terms while we still have something to bargain with. If we ride out, we die. If we die, the kingdom dies with us." The room falls silent. Baldwin sits, slumped in his throne. Standing for more than a few minutes causes his joints to swell and crack. His advisors can see him trembling with the effort of staying upright, but understand what he's weighing. If he stays behind Jerusalem's walls, the city might hold for weeks, maybe months if they ration carefully. But Saladin will burn every village, every farm, every church within 50 miles. The civilian population will suffer, slowly, horribly. If he rides out with 500 knights, they die quickly. But Saladin's army, busy slaughtering knights in open battle, might not have time to devastate the countryside. The peasants might survive long enough for help to arrive from Europe. It's not a choice between victory and defeat. It's a choice between dying with purpose or dying slowly while watching everyone else suffer first. Baldwin lifts his head. The silver mask catches torchlight. "Raymond, how fast can Saladin's army move when it's spread out foraging?" The question confuses everyone. Raymond frowns. Slower than usual, sire. They'd need time to reform ranks, but... And if we hit them while they're scattered, the room goes cold. My lord, with respect, Raymond gestures at Baldwin's bandaged hands, his wasted frame. You can barely mount a horse without assistance. Your hands can hold reins. That's all I need them to do. What happens next is recorded by multiple sources, Christian and Muslim alike, because what happens next is so insane that no one believes it until enemy chroniclers confirm every detail. November 24th, Baldwin IV, carried on a litter because his legs can't handle the palace stairs, is brought to the royal armoury. Knights help strap on his armour. His hands are so damaged the fingers won't close properly. They have to tie the sword to his wrist with leather straps. He orders the entire available force to prepare for immediate march. 500 knights, 80 Templars, 3,000 infantry, north, towards Saladin's army. Odo of Saint-Amand, the Templar Grand Master, a scarred veteran who's fought in a dozen battles, actually weeps when he sees Baldwin lifted onto his warhorse. The king's body has to be strapped to the saddle. His legs no longer have the strength to grip. They march at night, 45 miles in 36 hours. For context, that pace would exhaust healthy cavalry in good weather. For men carrying a dying king and knowing they're marching towards certain death, it borders on impossible. But here's where it gets strange. As they march, Baldwin keeps asking his scouts the same question. Is Saladin still moving north? Yes, sire. Is his army still spread out? Yes, sire. And each time, Baldwin, exhausted, feverish, held upright in his saddle by nothing but will, smiles beneath his mask. His knights don't understand. They assume it's delirium, fever dreams, the mind breaking under pressure. They're wrong. Baldwin has seen something, recognized a pattern in Saladin's movements that no one else has noticed. He's counting on Saladin being smart, on Saladin making the logical decision, the correct decision, the decision that will doom him. November 25th. Dawn breaks over terrain that will be soaked in blood by sunset. Saladin receives his first warning just after sunrise. A scout rides in, horse foaming with exhaustion. My lord, Crusader banners, North Ridge. Saladin doesn't even look up from his breakfast. A patrol. They'll withdraw when they see our numbers. My lord, the scout's voice wavers. There are hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Now Saladin looks up, and for the first time in his military career, the undefeated Sultan of Egypt and Syria realizes he's made a mistake. His army, confident, undisciplined after days of easy marching, spread across 3 miles of countryside looting farms and resting horses, is caught completely unprepared. And worse, standing on that ridge, silhouetted against the rising sun, is a figure in armour, topped with a silver mask, that catches the light like a second dawn. One of Saladin's commanders whispers, "Is that the Leper King?" Saladin stares, then quietly, "God help us. He came." What Saladin doesn't know yet, what no one except Baldwin understands, is that this battle won't be decided by numbers or steel or superior tactics. It will be decided by pain, or rather, the complete inability to feel it. 2 p.m, November 25th, 1177. The air smells like horse sweat and fear. Baldwin's 500 knights have formed a wedge. At the tip, 80 Templars in white surcoats with blood-red crosses. Men who've taken vows to never retreat, never surrender, never ask for mercy. Behind them, exhausted secular knights who said goodbye to their families yesterday, knowing they'd never return. And at the front of this impossibly outnumbered formation, strapped to his horse like a corpse being transported for burial, is Baldwin IV. His advisors are screaming at him one last time. "Sire, we can still fall back. Regroup at dash." Baldwin raises his bandaged right hand. The gesture shouldn't be possible. His fingers barely function. But somehow, impossibly, he raises that hand high enough for 500 men to see it. And he drops it forward. The signal to charge. You're one of those knights in that moment. You're about to charge 26,000 warriors. 52 enemies for every one of you. The mathematics of your death are already calculated. You'll be remembered as brave, maybe, but mostly just dead. Leading you is a 16-year-old boy whose body is literally rotting off his bones, who needs to be tied to his horse to stay upright, who should be in a monastery somewhere, not on a battlefield. But then you see something that changes everything. As the charge begins, as 500 horses surge forward and the ground starts shaking, Baldwin leans forward in his saddle. You can't see his face behind that silver mask, but you know he's smiling, and you think, if he's not afraid to die, why am I? At 400 yards, Saladin's scattered forces start scrambling to form defensive lines. Too slow. At 300 yards, Muslim archers fire. Arrows fall like black rain. Knights drop. Horses scream and tumble. The charge doesn't slow. At 200 yards, Saladin himself is shouting orders, trying to rally his centre. His elite Mamluks, 8,000 slave soldiers, trained from childhood to kill, are forming ranks as fast as they can. But they're terrified. Not of the numbers, of the madness charging toward them. At 100 yards, Baldwin does something no chronicler can explain. He draws his sword. His hands don't work. The blade is tied to his wrist. He shouldn't be able to lift it, but he raises that sword above his head, and 500 knights behind him see their dying king holding steel to the sky, and they scream, not a battle cry, but something primal, something that sounds like fury and grief and faith all burning together. At 50 yards, Muslim horses start backing up. Animals know. They smell death coming. At 10 yards, Muslim soldiers in the front ranks throw down their weapons and run. 2:15 p.m. The Templar wedge hits Saladin's centre like God's fist punching through parchment. The sound isn't what you'd expect. It's not clean, metallic ringing. It's wet, crunching, full of screaming. Horses, men, the air itself seems to be screaming. In the first 30 seconds, 300 Mamluks just cease to exist, trampled under charging war horses, bred specifically to be weapons, speared through by lances moving at full gallop, crushed under the weight of men in full armour moving at 20 miles per hour. But here's where it becomes unbelievable. The charge doesn't stop. Cavalry charges are supposed to hit hard, wheel away, regroup. It's basic tactics taught to every knight from childhood. The Templars keep going. They drive through the Muslim centre like a blade through flesh. And behind them, Baldwin's secular knights pour into the gap, widening it, turning it into a wound that won't close. 2:30 p.m, Saladin's centre, 8,000 warriors who've never lost a battle, breaks. Not retreats in good order, not falls back to secondary positions. Breaks. Men throwing down weapons, tearing off armour because it's too heavy to run in, trampling each other in panic to get away from those white and red crosses that just keep coming, keep killing. Don't stop, won't stop, can't be stopped. Saladin himself is screaming at his officers, "Reform! Reform the line!" No one's listening because something impossible is happening. That dying boy on the dying horse is cutting through their ranks like he can see the future, and his knights are following him like he's opened a road straight to paradise, and everywhere the silver mask turns, Muslim warriors flee. And here's where Baldwin's smile finally makes sense. Those ravines cutting through the plain, the ones Saladin hadn't bothered scouting, because he assumed he'd never need to retreat. They're funneling the fleeing Muslims into natural kill boxes. Knights pursue, and suddenly thousands of warriors are trapped in narrow canyons with steep walls, trampling each other, suffocating under the weight of their own panic. A Christian chronicler will later write, "The ravines filled with bodies like wells filling with water, until the dead made bridges for the dying to cross. A Muslim historian will confirm it. We fled into the earth's mouth, and the earth devoured us." 3 p.m. Saladin's personal guard, 2,000 of the finest warriors in the Muslim world, men sworn by sacred oath to die before leaving their sultan, sees the Templars coming, and they run. Saladin, abandoned, surrounded, does the only thing he can do. He finds a racing camel, faster than a horse in sand, and flees. The Sultan of Egypt and Syria, who'd never lost a battle, who commanded 26,000 men that morning, is running for his life on a pack animal. By 4 p.m, it's over. 20,000 Muslim warriors lie dead or dying across 3 miles of blood-soaked earth. Another 6,000 have scattered into the desert, abandoning weapons, armor, supplies, anything that might slow them down. Of Baldwin's 3,500 men who fought, 1,100 are dead. Heavy losses, but they've won. They've done the impossible. When they finally pull Baldwin from his horse, he's unconscious. The straps holding him in the saddle are the only reason he didn't fall during the battle. His bandages are soaked through with blood, wounds torn open by the sheer physical stress of wielding a sword his hands shouldn't have been able to hold. The knights think he's dead. Odo of Saint Amand, the Templar Grand Master, checks for breath, finds it, barely. He's openly weeping as he says to the knights gathered around, he can't feel pain. That's how he did it. He can't feel his body breaking, so he never stopped. He never knew when to stop. You've just watched 500 men defeat 26,000. Not because they were stronger, not because they had better equipment, not because they were more numerous, because they followed a boy who'd already lost everything except his will to fight. If that doesn't remind you how much one moment, one decision, one person can change everything, then you're not paying attention to the lesson written in blood across that field. Subscribe to Crimson Historians, because these aren't just stories. They're warnings about what happens when human will collides with human calculation. But here's what no one tells you about Montgisard. Saladin didn't stay defeated, and Baldwin had won the battle, but lost something far worse in the process. The night after Montgisard, Jerusalem burns candles in every window. Church bells ring for 72 hours straight. Priests call it a miracle. Peasants who'd been preparing to flee are dancing in the streets. Baldwin IV is being hailed as a second Judas Maccabeus, the warrior who saved God's people against impossible odds. But in the royal chamber, physicians are arguing over whether to amputate. The stress of the battle has accelerated Baldwin's leprosy catastrophically. Tissue that was merely damaged is now necrotic, infections spreading through flesh that can't heal properly. His hands, which somehow gripped a sword for 3 hours, are swollen twice their normal size and weeping pus through the bandages. He's 16 years old, and his body is dying faster now because of what he did to save his kingdom. The material gains from Montgisard are staggering. Saladin abandoned his entire supply train. Tents, weapons, gold, food for 26,000 men. All of it becomes Crusader property overnight. The Templars alone capture enough military equipment to outfit every Christian fortress in the Levant. Saladin's war chest, literal tons of gold meant to pay his soldiers for the coming siege of Jerusalem, now funds the Crusader kingdom for 2 years. Castles that were preparing surrender terms are suddenly fortifying walls again. European kingdoms that had written off Jerusalem start sending reinforcements. For the first time in decades, the Crusader states aren't just surviving, they're winning. But in Cairo and Damascus, the loss is catastrophic. Saladin's reputation, built over 15 years of careful conquest and diplomatic maneuvering, shatters overnight. Muslim chroniclers struggle to explain it. How does the Sword of Islam lose 20,000 warriors to 500 knights? Ibn al-Athir writes, "This was the most terrible catastrophe to befall the believers in this age." Another chronicler is more blunt. God turned his face from us that day. The real damage isn't military, it's psychological. Saladin had united the fractured Muslim world under one principle: inevitable victory. One march, one battle, and Jerusalem would return to Islamic rule. Now, emirs in Egypt are quietly negotiating separate peace deals. Syrian lords are questioning whether Saladin is God's chosen instrument or just a man who got lucky until he didn't. It takes Saladin 10 years to rebuild what Baldwin destroyed in 3 hours. 10 years. But here's the part that should haunt you. Baldwin's doctors tell him he has maybe 6 months to live, a year at most. The disease is too advanced. The battle accelerated deterioration beyond any hope of recovery. He lives 8 more years, 8 years of increasing agony, losing his sight, losing mobility, eventually unable to even hold a pen or feed himself. But his mind? Crystal clear until the very end, and during those 8 years, he defends Jerusalem against Saladin 3 more times, never with more than 1,000 knights, never losing. There's a moment in 1183, 6 years after Montgisard, when Saladin and Baldwin meet under a truce flag to negotiate prisoner exchanges. Baldwin is carried on a litter. He's blind now, can't walk, can barely speak above a whisper. Saladin looks at this broken boy who's haunted him for years and says something that Muslim chroniclers faithfully recorded. "I do not understand how God could give such a mind to such a body." Baldwin's response, whispered through a translator, because his voice is too weak to carry, "Perhaps so that when I win, no one can claim it was by strength alone." Saladin rides away in silence, and here's the final twist that reframes everything. When Baldwin IV finally dies in 1185, age 24, body destroyed, legacy secured, Saladin waits exactly 2 years. Then he conquers Jerusalem. Without Baldwin, the Crusader states collapse in months. The kingdom he saved with 500 knights at Montgisard falls apart without him, because he was the kingdom. His successors lose in years what Baldwin defended for 8. So did he win, or just delay the inevitable? Montgisard teaches us something that terrifies military historians. Numbers don't matter as much as we think they do. The Pentagon has entire departments dedicated to calculating force ratios, logistics, material advantage. We've built civilizations on the idea that more is better, that mathematics dictates outcomes. And then you have November 25th, 1177, 500 against 26,000, and the 500 win. Not because of superior tactics, though Baldwin's were brilliant. Not because of terrain advantage, though he used it masterfully. Not because of better equipment, because they didn't have it. They won because one dying boy refused to accept that mathematics determines fate. Baldwin IV understood something we've forgotten. The human will, when pushed past the point of self-preservation, when freed from the fear of pain, because pain no longer registers, becomes a force that logic can't calculate. He couldn't feel his body breaking, so he never knew when to stop. And 500 men, watching their king fight despite a body that should have collapsed hours earlier, decided that if he wouldn't quit, neither would they. We live in an era obsessed with probabilities. Algorithms tell us what stocks to buy. Polls predict elections before votes are cast. Models forecast wars based on GDP and troop numbers. Maybe we've lost something important in all that calculation. The understanding that history pivots on moments when someone refuses to accept the math, when 500 becomes more dangerous than 26,000 because those 500 believe in something the 26,000 don't. There's a letter Baldwin wrote to his sister Sibylla shortly before his death. It's kept in the Vatican archives, yellowed and fragile. In it he says, "I was told I would die young. They were right. I was told I would die a leper. They were right. I was told I could not rule. They were wrong. Perhaps God gives us diseases to show us that flesh is temporary, but will is eternal. My hands stopped working years ago, but my kingdom still stands." By the time she received that letter, Baldwin was already dead. 2 years later, the kingdom fell. But for 8 years that shouldn't have happened, 8 years that defied medical possibility, one dying boy held back an empire. You've just witnessed one of history's most fragile victories. A moment when everything, the kingdom, the faith, the lives of thousands, hung on the will of a teenager whose body was falling apart. If stories like this remind you how delicate civilization is, how close we always are to losing everything, how much one person's refusal to quit can change the world, subscribe to Crimson Historians, because the past isn't dead, it's just waiting for someone to remember. And if you think Baldwin's story is dark, wait until you hear about our next findings. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.